How do you live a worry-free life? You embrace your limitations and you set your intentions. And realize something, and this is something that I was sharing at 9 o'clock, and I was saying it's something that not everybody has understood or embraced, so it's a tough one. But life is inspired by your intentions, but motivated by your limitations. Life is inspired by your intentions, but motivated by your limitations. And this is a hard one, because people, we think we're supposed to be positive all the time, and it's certainly better to be positive than negative. But if you really want true power, you have to embrace your limitations and unleash the energy within them. I remember one time I saw a picture of an egg, and if you want to get what's good, the energy that's within the egg, you've got to crack the eggshell. And if you've got some limitation in your life, you've got to understand that it's not there to victimize you, it's there to help move you forward. The energy contained within the limitation, once you embrace it and free it up from its false belief, will move you forward, will move you ahead. It's like a wave. One time I was dealing with some really tough situations where I had a lot of emotion, and I didn't know what to do with my emotions, and I didn't have a lot of the tools I have now. And what came to me was a picture of a wave, and it was, you've got to let the wave move you ahead. Let the energy contained within your negative emotions move you ahead, but you don't drown in the wave. You don't just go, and then down you go. You let it move you ahead. You say, how do you do that? How do you do that indeed? I was listening to Eckhart Tolle, and he said that what he suggested was to say, when you have, let's say, some fear, I am the awareness that bears witness to this fear. I am that awareness that is noticing this jealousy. I am the awareness that is aware of this anger. And he said that when you've got something that's lack of peace, if you surround it, if you become aware of it, if you surround it with your awareness of it will turn your lack of peace into peace. Just by observing it, you unleash and unlock the power. Sometimes it means you have to ask questions and ask yourself, what is underneath this? What is, and free up that energy. I had 2 or 3 kind of nagging physical difficulties, and I kind of pushed them to the side, kind of pushed them over this way, and not really dealt with them. And I realized that this last week, I really hadn't been dealing with them. So I went out in my sacred space, which is my hammock, and I sat there with my legal pad, and I wrote out my questions, and I asked the parts of my body that were doing this stuff, what is it you want to tell me? What is it I'm supposed to learn about this? And I got some answers, very strong answers. They weren't necessarily, in one instance there was a step for me to take, but in some it was to go through a process to allow this to unfold. So there's something hidden with a potential and a power for good that is hidden within every so-called negative circumstance, whether it's an addiction, whether it's an illness, whether it's a problem or a person who's a problem. You can unleash and unlock that energy and let it move you forward. But you've got to stop seeing limitations as a bad thing. Embrace your limitations. I embrace my limitations. Together. I embrace my limitations, and I let them motivate me. Together.
And I let them motivate me.
So your life is inspired by your intentions, but motivated by your limitations, or the energy that you unlock within it. Now, not everybody understands this. Years ago, I was in a small 3-minister prayer group on Sunday mornings, and we would support each other in prayer, and we would share with each other what was really going on in our hearts, what we were working on, including our limitations, our doubts, and our fears. And then somebody said, let's bring in a 4th person, and they did, and that person wouldn't let anybody say anything negative. So if we were going, I'm dealing with this fear about it, you don't have any fears. You don't have any limitations. And it's like, and I went through about, 4 or 5 weeks of that, and I quit. It was like, no, I need prayer support. I need to be able to speak it. And I wasn't surprised if years later that person got into a lot of trouble because they weren't dealing with their limitations. You have to be willing to deal with your limitations. That doesn't mean you wallow in them. You know, my old mentor, Dr. Mary Allen, who wrote Explorer's Odyssey, a book I'm going to be teaching in 4 weeks, she said something to me that was, at first I didn't understand it. She said, if you take a truth and you push it too far, it becomes false. If but isn't that true in your life? Like, for instance, I should always be kind. Yes, and there's a time when you've got to let your kindness take another form. In other words, sometimes when you embrace your limitations, you don't want to push it too far, or you'll drown in them. So you take it only so far with this. So this is a matter of balance. This is a matter of learning from your limitations, but not drowning in them. Another time, when a minister comes into a church, sometimes you inherit whatever the belief system is that was taught by your predecessor. And I was in a board meeting early on in this church, and there was a person who was very well-intentioned, and it was the check-in time, which we have in our board meetings, and we check in and tell what's going on, and I just got the words out of my mouth, I'm embracing a limitation right now, and as soon as I took a breath, I heard, you don't have any limitations. You don't have any limitations. And I realized there was no space for me to talk about that at that point. And I realized my education in that particular environment was to teach people how to stop stuffing their limitations and to let them empower them. My sister works with rock and roll stars. That's what she does for a living. She's what's called a wrangler. And a wrangler takes care of the needs of whoever that is. And it's like, the Rolling Stones, everybody you can imagine, Yoko Ono. But she shared that even the people who have the biggest names, who've been doing this for many, many years, that they still have fears. She told me a lot of interesting stories about how they deal with their fears. And most of them who've survived this long no longer deal with their fears chemically. that they deal with it. And she shared with me, my favorite band was always the Grateful Dead. And through drug addictions related illness, their leader died. And so after about 2 years, they reformed with Bruce Hornsby at the helm, and they changed their name to the other ones. But they, according to my sister, she went with them to their first gig. In the limo, she said they were truly intimidated and had expressed a lot of fear. And how did they deal with it? They talked about it. They let it breathe. They talked about it. They let it out. They didn't wallow in it. They didn't go, I don't want to go on stage, I'm scared. But they talked about it honestly. And she said, and she didn't even like the Grateful Dead, but she said they did the best concert because it was energized. You can get energized, and they find that people who are public speakers, people who are in the limelight, they have to allow this, and otherwise they just kind of have a flat line, it's just kind of dull, but you were inspired by your intentions, but you were motivated by your limitations. You have to embrace your limitations and become the witness, become aware of them. Ask questions about them. That's what Byron Katie's The Work is about, is allowing yourself to become aware of what's underneath the circumstances, the beliefs, and the judgments in your life. There's a wonderful method called the agitated energy process. I've got it out on the table outside of Fellowship Hall. And it basically is asking the question, what am I feeling? And then what false belief am I holding that's causing this feeling? And then finding out what true belief would calm me. And you let that energy out. You let that wave move you forward. And what happens every time, each and every time, is that you end up with more energy. You're energized to move forward. You find that you're not fighting the circumstances of your life. You find that by setting an intention and then allowing the negativity to come up, that you move towards something that is greater and better for yourself. Not always what you had in mind, but you set an intention. Now, there's a wonderful experience I had maybe 25 years ago. I was in a church where I was writing. I was an associate minister. I had a little column in the church newsletter like you always do. And the guy right underneath me was a guy named Sidney Hennis. And I didn't know who he was, but he'd always write about healing. And I didn't know anything about him. So I asked somebody, who's Sidney Hennis? Because it was a big church. And they said, oh, you don't know about Sidney's story. Here was a man who 38 years before had been diagnosed with ALS. That's Lou Gehrig's disease. That's the same disease that Stephen Hawking has. And people would say at that time, well, Stephen Hawking had lived the longest of anybody who had ALS. Well, not only had this man lived much longer than Stephen Hawking had, But when he went into the Unity Minister in Menlo Park, California, and she gave him some affirmations, he worked with them in such a way, very simply, by the way. He didn't make a big deal out of it, but he just worked with them every day in times of meditation and prayer, that the symptoms reversed. He was in a wheelchair when he saw her. When I met him, the first time I saw him, if I didn't know any better, I thought maybe he'd been drinking a little bit. He just kind of walked with a little bit of a wobble. He talked with a slight slur. But the guy had almost had unintelligible speech. He couldn't drive. He couldn't walk. He was in a wheelchair. But as the years went on, he worked with these principles. Now, it's not to say the soul has its agenda. We're not all here to be here forever, and we all have different things to learn. So when you do this work of planting your seed of intention, understand that you let go of the result. I plant my seed of intention and I let go of the result. Together? I plant my seed of intention and I let go of the result. The analogy that came to me was that of a trellis and of parenting. When you parent a child, you don't control the child. You create an environment, a structure, in which they can grow the way they naturally will grow. Much like a trellis will allow a vine to grow. The trellis doesn't force the vine to grow, but provides the needed structure necessary for the vine to grow the way it needs to without controlling that growth. Similarly, when you set an intention, you're creating a trellis, a structure of thought upon which the natural progression of your life will move forward. And it's an important sense of balance where you realize you don't control the answer coming through to you, but you set your intention to create a structure so that it can grow to its maximum potential. So seeing it that way perhaps can help. Seeing it as a trellis, and that you aren't trying to force your will on the universe. Jesus talked about this and letting go of worry when he said, "Why do you worry about your clothes? Look at how the lilies of the field grow. They don't labor or spin, yet I'm telling you, not even Solomon in all of his splendor was dressed like one of these. And if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown in fire, will he not so much more clothe you, O you of little faith? So don't worry, saying, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to wear? Even the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to worry about itself. Each day's got enough trouble for itself." So he was talking here about not worrying. Worrying is the opposite of faith. Worrying is a projection in the future that what's coming up in the future is our enemy that is here to hurt us, instead of understanding and trusting that the future is simply the outforming of what seeds we're planting right now, and that's it. Do not worry. And he said even the pagans worry about these things. You know, what's a pagan? You think, oh, pagan, what's that? I don't know. Some guy with weird paint is going around doing a dance or something? No. Pagan meant the people lived out in the country. They were the backwards people, the hillbillies, the rednecks, or whatever. It's like Jeff Foxworthy. You might be a pagan if, it's that backwards superstitious view of things. And there is a pagan in you, that is a part of you that is backwards and superstitious and doesn't understand that you can let go of fear and worry. And the best way to do it is to set clear intentions and then to embrace your limitations. I set clear intentions and I embrace my limitations. Together? I set clear intentions and I embrace my limitations. The other significant place where Jesus talked about pagans was just before he gave the Lord's Prayer. He said, the pagans think, the backwards people, the superstitious people, think that by using a lot of words, they will be heard better. But don't do that. Pray like this. And then he gave the Lord's Prayer, which was just a series of 7 affirmations with 55 words in Aramaic. Very simple. You've got to keep it simple. Keep your eye on the ball. Keep yourself focused on the simplicity of your desire. You know, the picture came to my mind of a kid who wanted to cook dinner for the parents and got out all the pots and pans and all the measuring cups and all the measuring spoons and all the plates and all the dishes, and that was the best boxed Kraft macaroni and cheese they ever had. You know, that was supposed to be funny. You know, keeping yourself focused on keeping it simple. Keep your practices simple. Sidney Hennis, the man who had that incredible healing, took a few basic principles and put them to work every day. He didn't make a big metaphysical deal out of it. He worked with it, and the results came forth. You know, each one of us has the opportunity to do this kind of work, but we've got to allow ourselves to ask the questions necessary and to allow these goals, these intentions to be set through us. Mary Beth Spear has been doing some work around visioning, which is Michael Beckwith's very simple 5-step technique of allowing a vision to emerge from your soul, from your higher self, from spirit, from God, and not trying to force it, but rather seeing what it naturally reveals about what needs to be released and what needs to be embraced. And starting in September, she's going to give a Sunday service on this, and she's also going to be leading the third Sunday of the month a group at 12:30 in this room to do visioning work. But we've got these visioning steps right outside of fellowship on a sheet of paper. Take some time to write these things down. Get in touch with what the vision is. Get in touch with what your divine idea is. Get in touch with that vision that is wanting to be birthed through you rather than trying to force your will on things. You know, they did a study with biofeedback where they found that people who were able to raise the temperature of their fingers would get over their migraines. And they found it was almost miraculous. Once their finger temperature went up, their migraines would go away. So they thought, well, let's train people using little thermometers to make their fingers get warmer. They had found that people had great volition and choice and things like that, so they would make people do this. So they found that by having people do that, the finger temperature would get colder, not hotter. And they didn't understand why. It's because people were forcing it. What they found worked was simply for people to get quiet and just visualize a warm glow without any attachment, just keeping it very simple, not forcing it, not pushing it. And then and only then would the fingertips get warmer and they would get over their migraines. Similarly, as Jesus said, don't worry, don't effort. Don't think by your many words like the pagans that you're going to make your prayer answered. Just keep it simple and keep it basic. It's so important for us to do this and to understand that it is our intention and the power and strength of our intention that makes a difference. How many of you have planted plants during this spring season into summer? You notice that when you plant the plant, you plant a tomato seed, you trust that the seed has within it everything it needs to come forth. You don't dig it up and work on it or whatever. You just plant the intention. But you've got to be willing to plant the intention. I remember in my first church, I had a neighboring minister who probably was the best writer I knew in Unity. The guy wrote fabulous stuff. But I would always get printed in Unity magazine. And he said to me, how come you always get printed in Unity magazine? And I said, because I mail it in. You know, you have to be willing. You say, well, I believe in all this stuff. I think but you've got to put it into practice. And it isn't through a lot of efforting, but just take a little bit of time every day. Tuesday night, our silent healing meditation service is so powerful. I remember in 1981, Edwene Gaines saying to me, you know, Greg, and she just came out of the blue, out of nowhere. You know, Greg, a silent healing meditation service is going to be the focus of your entire ministry. I was like, what? So I started working. And in those days, I worked more with affirmations, and it was more of a spoken word type thing. As the years have gone on, now it's more about silence and visualization. But it has been, and it's been the focus wherever I've gone, whatever I've done. In fact, I've got this here. This was Unity's best-selling CD, Gift of Healing, Gift of Sleeping, 45,000 copies. And when I first gave it away on the TV show There Is a Way, the night before I was going to go on air to give away the 4,000 copies that people ended up getting, I had the worst case of flu I've ever had in my life. I mean, I was so sick that night, and all I did was listen to this CD. It was a tape in those days, over and over and over again. And I watched myself on the broadcast after I got a copy of it, and I looked pretty tired, but I wasn't sick. It was because of lack of sleep, but it worked to work it through. And I actually have a stack about this big of people who've had, terminal illnesses disappear. They've gone in under the knife in operating rooms, and there was nothing there. Heard popping sounds and tumors. I mean, these kind of things have happened, not because it's complicated, not because it's some kind of efforting, but it's just setting intentions and following through, and then letting go of the results. Because understand this, that you put forth your intention, and then you let go of the result. I put forth my intention, and I let go of my result. Together. I put forth my intention, and I let go of my result. Because you don't know what your soul really needs for your highest good all the time. You just have an idea. You put forth that intention, you let it go, and then you let it grow up on the trellis of your faith the way it needs to. What we're going to do right now is we're going to set our intention. We're going to do a little bit of intentional work. And so I want you to take a deep breath, let it out, and remember that creative space that you created during the meditation time. Just feel the spaciousness. Become aware of the air all around you. Become aware that there is vibration and energy within and all around you. And letting go of everything that you're holding on to. Just set your intention. In the time of visualization, a time of affirmation, a time of prayer, just take a moment. The creative potential has power. The power of intention. And now I embrace any limitation that this naturally brings up. Absorb it and let it go. Allow that which is underneath to come up and be released. And I ride the wave of the feeling of this new energy, this presence and power. Thank you, God. And so it is. And now I want you to take a deep breath and let it out. And we're going to do some visualization. And set aside any pen or paper, anything you have in your lap or your hands are involved with. And turn your hands upward. And as we do this work, you're going to invite light into your beingness. And then allow it, the light, to absorb any negativity, any limitations that you may experience. So now breathe in slowly and let it fill your lungs with light, and let that light move out to embrace your entire body, absorbing any negativity that you've experienced in your body, and then breathe it out through your mouth. And then just continue to do this on the level of your physical body, imagining light coming in to your heart and lungs, and then moving out to fill every cell at your own rate and speed. And you imagine that light absorbing any conditions that you're working on in your physical healing. And when you breathe out, you just, through breathing out through your mouth, release all this negativity. And now, when you breathe in, when you do at your own rate, imagine that light not only filling your body, but moving out to surround you on the emotional level, and to lift up all your emotions so that you have a glow around you, absorbing all negativity as you breathe it out through your mouth. And setting aside what's in your hands, with your hands face up. Let that light each time come in with your breath and move out to expand and absorb all feelings of doubt or fear, sadness or anger, and then you breathe it out through your mouth. Each time breathing in light at your own rate. And surrounding you with the right protective energy of emotional vibrancy, light. And now as you breathe in, this light not only fills your lungs and your body and moves out to surround you, but fills the room. And each time you feel the light getting brighter and brighter, and then it absorbs any false beliefs that you're holding, that you breathe out through your mouth. Just feel yourself getting lighter and lighter. And you can allow the absorption of anything that you're working on in your life. And then just breathe it out whenever you breathe out. By embracing these limitations and releasing them, you grow lighter and lighter. Your light grows brighter and brighter. And now allow yourself to breathe at your normal rate and just feel the spaciousness, the openness, the lightedness of the new space you've opened within you. And into this receptive space, plant a seed thought, an intention, a prayer, something that you would like to see take place. In your own way, just state it, visualize it, say it, whatever you want silently. And as you let it go, and as you feel yourself at peace, you know that the way to live a worry-free life of peace, is to embrace and release all limitations, and to set the intentions, and then to let them go and trust that they will grow up in the form that needs to happen for the highest good of all concerned. With great confidence and a sense of goodwill, a pleasurable sense of peace. We bring ourselves back to the presence of this room, grateful.
And now we give with a powerful intention. And that's going to be our affirmation. I give with a powerful intention, and I receive abundantly. Together. I give with a powerful intention, and I receive abundantly. And silently. And again aloud together. I give with a powerful intention, and I receive abundantly. And so it is. Thank you, God. So you place your intention in as you give your gift.